Welcome to Let's Talk About It, a podcast created by students for students. There's a lot of talking going on these days, but oftentimes that talk seems empty. We're searching for real, genuine conversation. We want a space where we're able to talk about everything from the serious to the seemingly mundane and see how faith informs that conversation. Have something on your mind? We do. So let's talk about it. All right, welcome back to Let's Talk About It here in our series, The 10 Commandments in 2020. And I got with me, this is Pastor Lee, I got with me
Hayden.
And
Clayton.
Hey, Clayton, good to have you back. It's been a minute since we had you. Hot minute on Let's Talk About It. This is kind of the original, actually. This is kind of fun.
OG crew.
The OG crew, because these are the guys that Let's Talk About It as a podcast started because we were sitting there at the end of January in 2020, and we were having a student leader meeting or crew team meeting, and I walk into my office and they've set up all this equipment. We go live on Instagram. I said, "What are y'all doing?" And they said, "We're testing stuff out for the podcast," because they've been talking about doing a podcast for a while. And then lo and behold, it kind of grew from there. We went into this thing, I don't know if you've heard of it, but a pandemic, and became kind of a crucial piece of what we've been doing. So the original crew's here for Let's Talk About It. And we've been doing the 10 Commandments in 2020. And the idea behind that is simply we've had a few episodes this is episode 3 for us. And the idea is we're sitting with a lot of stuff. 2020 is a crazy year, right? And basically, a lot of the conversations we've had as church workers, stuff like that, when we've been reflecting, actually comes back a lot to the 10 Commandments and how applicable they are. And we've talked about what the 10 Commandments are and what they show us to be. We got a good conversation going on the first commandment. And now, this episode is the second commandment in 2020, and that's where we're at. So second commandment, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord. And of course, we've been looking through that lens of Martin Luther's question, what is this, or what does this mean? And Martin Luther says, well, I'll stop before I get to what Martin Luther says. When you hear those words, guys, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, what comes to mind? What's running through your head? What do you remember that you've learned before?
Using his names in like situations you shouldn't.
Okay, so using it.
Obviously, though, when you say it, though, you think of back times when you might have or probably have used it.
Okay, so and when you say you probably shouldn't have, what are those situations where you probably shouldn't have?
Like when you get mad at something and you pull out the GD and you're like, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that.
Oh, sure. Okay, yeah.
Anytime it's not praising him.
Okay, anytime it's not praising him, anytime you're not talking to him, things like that. Okay, good. So yeah, you're kind of remembering back to that. Yeah, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. So in other words, if you're saying God's name, if you're saying the name of Jesus, it's because you were referring to him or you were talking to him, right? So that's kind of the idea behind it. And so Luther kind of unpacks that, right? And he says, what does this mean? It means we should fear and love God so that we do not curse, swear, use satanic arts, lie, or deceive by his name, but call upon it in every trouble, pray, praise, and give thanks. Okay, so that's a whole lot to kind of bite down on. But what we want to kind of do is talk about this. What stands out to you about this before we kind of get into that looking at the second commandment in 2020. So what's standing out to you here when it comes to this topic about second commandment?
Not swearing is hard.
Not swearing is hard. Okay, why? Okay, well, let's talk about the journey of swearing though. Like, so when do you feel like was swearing ever like forbidden, or did you ever have the shame factor when you swore, things like that?
Yes.
Okay, your short answers for me. What do you think?
When you're younger, definitely when you're younger, like you're always taught, like my mom would wash my mouth out with soap if I said something bad.
Oh, sure.
And there's always that thing, like went to Christian school, like you would definitely get some sort of punishment if you did say something like that.
I remember there was one time I was listening to a song in the car and it like had the bleeped out word, but like I knew what it was.
Oh yeah.
And I was singing it because like I knew the whole song, and I ended up singing the lyric that was like the bleeped out part, and I was probably like in like third grade or something, and I got so scared because I thought my mom was gonna like kill me, and then she didn't even notice. I was like, whew.
Well, see,
that was a close one.
And I was that kid. I was such an innocent little kid because like I was the one that during the Apostles' Creed, I couldn't say a piece of it. You know what I'm talking about? So whenever it came to he descended into hell, I couldn't say that as a little kid. I was like, how are we allowed to say this in church? I can't understand. Like, so that's kind of how innocent I was. I was telling these guys, we were talking a little bit about our journeys of swearing beforehand. And like, I remember being a kid and my older brother had a friend named Tucker, So you can imagine, right, how much fun they have with that. And so there's one time they were like, they were locking me inside a laundry room, and they said, "You're not allowed to come out until you say Tucker's name, but instead of a T, make it an F." And I was like, why? Why would I say that? And at that point, I didn't even know that word. Okay. So it's probably like what, 6, 7, 8, somewhere around there. I didn't even know. And then I said it and they laughed and I thought it was funny. Well, lo and behold, like, learn that word's not funny when you say it around your parents. Yeah, exactly. So, but then it became like, oh, that's like one of those words. And I remember my mom always told a story about my sister, my little sister, when she was a little kid, right? Because little kids are sponges and they say whatever they hear other people saying. So, and listener, I'm gonna have to apologize to you, but it's a fun story and it applies to this. But apparently she's like 5 years old, walking around her room, right? And they walk by her room, and my sister Michelle is going, "Where's that damn hairbrush? Damn. And I was like, oh no. Like a 5-year-old, can you imagine, as a parent? And I remember even being at one of my sister's softball games when I was older, and there was a group of kids, so it's elementary school age, and like I said that same word in front of my friends. Well, they went, and all the moms who were sitting around in a circle weren't even watching the game. So I was like, what are you doing? But they were all sitting around, and they told on me for saying that word. And my mom was getting on to me. I was like, what? Dad says it every time he backs out of the driveway and forgets something. And she's like, actually, that's me, but you can't say that word. So it's kind of like that journey with just cursing, right? But there's this other level of with God's name too that's kind of layered into it. I mean, what else is standing out to you when you think about it? Or what's your journey? Or when did you first realize, or when did it become the cool thing for you guys walking through this?
When my parents asked me what I knew.
Oh, yeah. No. Talk about that.
Oh, yeah. Not like, we were sitting in the car, like, so what all curse words do you know? And I started rambling on. And they're like, like their jaws dropped. They were just like, what is going on? Like the world is ending. Like,
Well, how old were you when that happened?
Oh, yesterday. No.
Not yesterday. I've known you long enough to know it wasn't yesterday.
Probably like 5th grade.
5th grade? Okay,
Yeah.
so like 10 years old there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would have to say probably like 4th or 5th grade was when it was like cool.
It all of a sudden became cool?
Yeah, and I don't know why. But now it's like just instilled in your brain to like just like every other word. It's like,
Well, and so why do you think that too? Because maybe I can't see, this is where I always say I'm like the bad youth pastor because I can't relate to some things like that. But I don't remember it ever becoming like just natural or something like that. Actually, it was pretty unnatural. And maybe it's because like the jobs I had and stuff like that. So like my summer job in high school was for a Christian day camp. So we couldn't. Like there was no way. We'd get in huge trouble.
Get fired.
The kids would totally tattle on you, all this stuff. So you could not say things because they would get back to their parents and they would say something. So the environment was kind of clean there. Like, yeah, I guess there was stuff on the football field, but like I really actually don't even remember a lot. I remember some coaches saying some stuff, but they could get away with it, whereas we couldn't get away with it if the coaches heard it or something like that. I don't know. It wasn't like a native language by any means. So like, what do you think? Where do you think that comes from? Because I do notice it is a popular thing now.
I think it's also like, I think for me, it's like who I grew up around, like especially like my parents too. It was just like, that was just normal. It was like every other word or something like that. You know what I mean? And like, especially like my stepdad is like, whoo, it's like, it's hard to get a word that's, you know, not a curse word out of him.
Yeah. How about you, Clayton? When do you think it became like a thing, or why did it become a thing?
I wouldn't say it became like a thing until I was like in high school. And I guess I didn't really start saying anything like that though until I like had confidence. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I really didn't feel like I had confidence until like senior year, or not senior year. I mean high school. But like
Till high school. Okay.
Yeah. But like my family, like we have filters, but like sometimes it always slips out type deal. And it's just, I don't know. It just kind of bled into it. We're all my family is like pretty much older now. We're all kind of pretty much, or at least me and Meryl are semi-adults. Now I got to be in a real adult college, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it just kind of, you never really know when, there's not like a specific time where I just said, oh, it's normal.
Yeah. And I guess like when I think back then, like I remember like people started kind of cussing more when they wanted to rebel. Like that was really it. And like, and granted now, especially with my profession, it's really funny. Like I think it's funny. Like people will cuss in front of me sometimes, and then all of a sudden like they'll have that feeling you had when you were a kid. like, and you said it in front of your parents and thought you were gonna get in big trouble. It's exactly what they do to me, and it's like,
Jaden on
really, right. Yeah. I was like, I can't believe I just did that. It's like
so
I cussed in front of
sorry.
the pastor, and like it's one of those like I always kind of laugh because I was like, look. Like, because ultimately, for me at least, I'm looking at it through this lens. Like, who do you need to apologize to? It's not me. Like, it's the big guy. Like, so, like, and certainly, like, I understand that all Christians are represented, and certainly pastors have this kind of other kind of representation of God, so to speak, and things like that people see and they feel that way. But I'm always like, oh, I've never heard that word before. What does that mean? Like, I always kind of have a little bit of fun with it, I guess. Well, and like speaking of having fun with it, I know like when we play basketball, like, well, because it's ultimately this commandment is about using God's name, right? So Jesus or God, except for a lot of times when you say those or you hear people saying them, they're not praying, they're not talking about him. And so like I'll use the example of playing pickup basketball. Happens all the time.
League gets very
all
intense.
the time. But I learned in seminary, there was a guy that did a great job with this, of someone would do that, like they'd stub their toe or something bad would happen, they'd drop something, they'd play basketball, and the guy would stop, even playing basketball, he would just stop, stand still, fold his hands, and bow his head. And we're like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, well, Bobby over here is praying apparently, so I figured I'd stop and join him. So it was just this is a seminary.
That's
yeah.
so funny.
But it was a really creative way to address it, right? The reminder of like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't say his name unless I'm talking to him or talking about him in an appropriate, respectful way. So is there anything else that kind of stands out before we kind of dive into 2020 and apply the Second Commandment in 2020? Is there anything that stands out here with this this meaning that Luther paints there?
I think lying and deceptiveness is interesting.
Yeah,
that it ties into that.
Oh yeah, totally. And so when we dive in there, get in there, but like the other piece is the specifically lying or deceiving by his name, right? So curse by his name, swear by his name, use satanic arts by his name, lie. Or deceive by his name, I think is kind of the thrust of what's going. Or at the same time, it could just be don't curse, swear, don't use satanic arts, don't lie, or don't deceive by his name. Because there's this level of people using God in a way that God would not want him used, if that makes sense. So I guess that's certainly something to think. But then the other piece is going to have to play out too, right? The call upon it in every trouble, pray, praise, and give thanks, and certainly that. So let's go ahead and kind of take that tip into 2020. So like, I mean, I think about this. So I've been exposed to how prevalent this is because I've recently started playing Fortnite, as you guys know.
Video games.
And it's fun. I enjoy it. I have learned that Fortnite is not fun when you play by yourself. Like you have to be playing with other people, otherwise it's not fun at all. So I haven't played in like a week, easy,
Unless he's playing
because
with
no one
Clayton.
else is ever on, right? So that's the way it feels. But my little brother streams, and so he'll have people coming on all the time, and they're usually probably like high school age, something like that, or sometimes even it feels like a middle schooler's on there because their voice is so high they have to be in middle school. But like what I've noticed is as soon as they jump on, some of the stuff they say is almost like offensive, and it's crazy and it's insane. And like I remember at one point the last time I played, probably a week ago, the kid jumped on and was just I don't think he used more than 5 words that weren't some sort of inappropriate or cuss word. And it was like, it didn't even really make sense, the things that he was saying. He was just yelling, I think, at my little brother for not resing him or resurrecting him or whatever. Bringing him back to life.
I like that.
What's the word? What does that
Res.
mean? Revive. He wasn't reviving him. He had died. My brother died in the game. We were on the team. So people that don't understand Fortnite get in the picture. But he was just dropping all these expletives or inappropriate things. And I was like, child, like learn to use language, it was just kind of crazy. Like, but I remember saying like, you child, because I was so over like the thing. I mean, I muted them. You're able to mute people in there. Like that kind of helped, but it was like, it was nuts. I mean, it was
like
kind of
muted.
insane because there was this rage behind it, which made it interesting, but then also this like incredibly inappropriate side to it as well, which like my little brother, I think that he was a little more mindful because I was on there with him, but it was just interesting that was just a common thing. And I don't get it. It's one of those, I think when I was pretty young, I guess at some point, or maybe it was in my camp counselor days, someone pointed it out to me on how to deal with that when you have a little kid cussing or something. And I think the wisdom they gave was, look, God has given us so many words to use. Why are you choosing to use those few, So that's the thing, is we have such a great vocabulary, especially in the English language. So like, why would we choose to use like 7 or 8 that are just blatant and offensive and things like that in ways, and then there's of course the counterculture that says, oh, you're restricting my freedom. I was like, actually, I think you're restricting your freedom by just using those words a lot of times too. But that's certainly the like pious whatever stance. What are you guys thinking of when you think about 2020 and its relevance with the Second Commandment?
Growing up, my mom would always say like, well, if you're cursing, it's like usually like if that's all you're saying is like you're cursing, you're like lack of knowledge type deal.
Yeah,
like you don't know enough words to speak what you're really trying to get through.
Exactly.
So like you keep saying that stuff. That's just growing up. That's what I feel like, and that's still how I feel today.
Yeah,
and I feel like you see that a lot more, not necessarily now in the climate that we're at right now, but definitely a lot of anger and a lot of frustration in times of like right now. And people aren't showing it in the best way, and they're not being very mindful of what they're saying, and they're more just trying to take other people down with their words.
Exactly. I mean, with all like, granted, I think we'll talk about division in other episodes too, but certainly divisiveness does this. I secrets out of the bag. Every 4 years this happens. Every election gets worse than the last. It's insane. But I think you're exactly right. It kind of pairs with what both of you guys were saying. Of like, one, for whatever reason, people can't expand their vocabulary enough to really communicate what they want to say. But then two, there's this feeling that you just have to trash people, and I mean, and especially in the gaming world. I noticed
you have to trash people in the gaming world.
Well, and it's so interesting.
It's just how it is. You can't go around it.
Well, and it's not just gaming world, right? Or maybe that is where it stems from. But I remember talking about. I've talked every year. I've had to talk to guys or boys in the youth group and say like, why do you keep destroying each other?
It's in that competitive nature. I feel like. It's kind of getting brought along with it.
Okay, but I noticed it particularly boys. I think girls probably do it in a different way.
Because they're not near as competitive, probably.
Okay, that's good. So maybe it is this competitive nature, because that's certainly bringing out, Aiden, what you were talking about with the divisiveness, and I have to beat the other person, so I have to use whatever I can, demean them, and things like that. Now, I will say, I think our politics, so we're in 2020, we're in an election year. I remember watching this, see, if he wasn't running for president this year, it wouldn't be controversial. But I remember Joe Biden's VP debates and being, for me at least, so offended watching these, because all he would do with both vice presidents that he went up against was laugh at them, was demean them, would talk over them. It was crazy. And everybody got mad last go around with Trump and Clinton and felt like Trump was doing the same thing. And I was like, look, you created this. Like, you allowed this. You thought it was funny to watch Biden smile when other vice presidential candidates were talking, and you thought it was funny and appropriate for him to talk and demean and things like that. And so now I'm actually kind of interested in how the debates are going to go. So listener, you're listening. I don't know exactly when this is being released for you. We're recording here at the beginning of August. So maybe some debates have already happened and you're already seeing it happen, but I cannot imagine the what would I say? The inappropriate example of communication that these debates are going to be, like between these two candidates.
It's going to be ruthless.
It is. It's going to be insane, because both are going to laugh at each other. Both are going to call each other names.
It's going to be rated R.
Each other. I know. And it's like, well, and it's not just these guys. So don't get me wrong. It's not just presidential ones. But I remember my senior year of college, I took a class at Birmingham Southern, where I went to college, Fort Ever. And we went to Montgomery for a class called Southern Politics. And so we got to go to the Alabama Senate and the Alabama House of Representatives and see how it went. And I remember being just appalled, because you see all these elementary school kids taking their field trip to the Capitol and things like that. And you go to the House of Representatives and you count 8 people asleep. You count 10 people playing solitaire or something else on there, and they're getting paid like good money to sit up here at the Capitol. None of them are listening to this very impassionate speaker at the very front until the governor, at that time, Governor Bentley, walks in, and they all, oh, Governor Bentley's on the floor. Hold on, passionate speaker. And everybody claps and wakes up and things like that. And it's just ridiculous in a sense, because this is what these kids are seeing. This is what it means to be a leader of this country. Now, then go to the Senate, the Alabama Senate, and at least the people are paying attention that are sitting there. But up front is 2 men yelling at each other, like so furious about the bill that they're talking about, just dismissing. And the reality is, this is not a recent problem. I don't know if you saw the movie Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis. So in there, they kind of talk about how this is actually the blood of of American politics. Like back then, that was how politics was done. You completely obliterate the other side. So I think it finds its roots. And if it was happening back then it was probably happening long before then too. So somewhere along that human nature of I have to bash, I have to put down, I have to destroy comes in. And again, in boys, for whatever reason, that competitive side, it's insane to watch. And it's hard to watch because like you guys know, whether or not you'll admit it or not, boys have feelings.
No, I don't have feelings.
I'm a brick.
Stone rock.
But like you have like so many mental issues because these boys take to
I don't
heart.
have mental issues.
No, I'm not. Isn't that where that word snowflake comes in? Like all of a sudden I was talking about you somehow. I don't mean it. So like
You called me snowflake.
We have it on recording now.
But the idea is right that the words do matter, and especially when we think about God's perspective on things, we can use our words for encouragement. Actually, James brings this out, the book of James, of you can use your words. How in the world? James kind of gets mad at God's people and says, how in the world can praises and curses come out of the same mouth? So think about it. You go to church, it's kind of like when people say you kiss your mother with that mouth or something like that, which is a weird saying altogether, right? But the idea is,
ew, you kiss your mother.
You praise God with that mouth. Like you go and tell God you love him and you praise him, and then you turn around and curse others. That's backwards, right? And James is kind of pointing that out. So then that's kind of a law heavy way to look at it. But what else? When you think of 2020 though, so we got that division in the country, that beating each other down, that using like curses or lying or deceiving or doing everything you can to get your position across, cursing, swearing, beating down the other side, certainly coming full force out of 2020. What else are you guys noticing?
I also see it a lot in the protests that we've been having lately.
Oh, interesting. Talk about that.
You can see a lot of on both sides of how it's like we're just trying to ram at each other just to get our points across and not have just like a civil agreement to understand where we both stand, instead of just, going after each other and basically trying to put everybody down, in like all of it. Sure.
And I think like just to clarify too, you're specifically talking about social media's coverage of these things, right? Yeah. Because that's the thing, I got the opportunity to go to at least one of them. I quarantined afterward just to stay safe and things like that. But when I went there, I was actually kind of surprised at how peaceful it actually was. And this was the one in Houston, walking with George Floyd's family and things like that. And it was really just that. I mean, to be able to walk with his family, support his family this time, not hold him up. A lot of people said he was a martyr. I was like, no, they're not holding him up as a martyr or a hero. It's just he shouldn't have died, right? That's kind of the thought behind it. From what you were hearing from people, I wanted to see. I was curious. What is this actually like? Because I knew my Facebook was going to tell me something completely different. But the coverage, I mean, it goes back to media coverage too. It's the same thing. I'm just slamming the other side, doing everything you can. And this same topic is going to be really important for us when we get to the 8th commandment too. I mean, because this is all over the place as far as what we're called to do as God's people, how he made us to be. So it's just kind of interesting. And there were certainly things like I will not chant with everybody else if they want to say F the police or something. That doesn't make any sense to me. And there was small groups that wanted to do that, but the crowd at large did not say that. They didn't want to. They were trying to be peaceful in what they were doing. And that was at least the one here in Houston. I understand, obviously, other ones have gotten out of control. And that's the thing, protest, riot, they're not synonymous
Completely
words.
different.
Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting world to live in with that. But as far as this one, again, it's interesting. Why do you think I'm going to go to your side if you're going to use expletives or curse words towards something or someone? That doesn't help me get to your side or help me understand your side either. There's other words. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to tell anyone else how to live. I'm sharing from my perspective, right? And I'm certainly not trying to diminish anybody's anger for any reason whatsoever. We'll definitely get to anger in the 5th commandment. That'll be a fun one to talk about. But kind of just talking from that Christian perspective, how are we seeing it? How do we understand our lives? How do we navigate our lives through the light of the 2nd commandment? So I guess again, lots of pieces here, lying or deceiving by his name. Well, that's okay. Have you guys seen that in 2020? The idea of people trying to use God for their opinion. No. Have you seen this? Dude, it's all over social media on the adult side.
Like God says this and you should do that.
Oh, exactly. Well,
God they'll twist it up.
God is behind my vote. God is behind my my position on the pandemic.
It's
God
the
is behind
darn
my position on the
Facebook. You gotta
protest.
get off of it.
I know, and that's the thing is
Get
people
the
are using
Karens
it,
out
though.
of there.
But they're just using scripture their own ways, or trying to. I saw this, and let's not even use 2020 right now. But do y'all remember like Occupy Wall Street? Do y'all remember that thing?
Sorry, we were too young.
It was probably about 10 years ago. So it was, y'all were probably pretty in elementary school then, right? And so
I was in second grade, I think.
but the idea was like people were sitting on Wall Street to try and protest equality or something. I don't know, but there were people that were using Jesus cleansing the temple as a defense of why they were sitting on Wall Street. If Jesus were alive today, he would be sitting on Wall Street. And I'm sitting there reading this, going, well, like. First of all, Wall Street's not a temple, and it shouldn't be, right? But they tried to say what Jesus was doing was fighting for economic equality or something like that. And it was just completely using God's word in a different way than it was supposed to be, because obviously Jesus was very clear in what he meant there when he was cleansing the temple and things like that. But it was just interesting how people will choose to do that. Or today I'll see people say, Christians, well, you tell me you believe this. Why aren't you standing up for this? And I was like, well, most of the time people are trying to process it. And I'm very much a processor, so I resonate with that. But it's interesting how people are trying to use God to deceive or to beat down or other things like that. And you can't really use God to do that. So it's really kind of fascinating when you think of that. Well, and then kind of wrapping this up with 2020 then, like the end of the what does this mean question from Luther is kind of fascinating, because it says we should call upon his name, right? Rather than doing all those other things, call upon it in every trouble, pray, praise, and give thanks. So here's the question for you guys. How much of that do you see in 2020 and why or why not?
I don't see a lot. I mean, I actually take that back. Right now I see a lot more of that than I did before the pandemic.
Really?
I think I've seen a lot more just outreach to people and trying to show that this is, we need to stay together and united as just humans, but in that you're also seeing that we're trying to give thanks and all that stuff, and just trying to be thankful for what we have in this time, because like we said in one of the earlier episodes, you're not always guaranteed tomorrow kind of thing. And so being able to give thanks for what you have now is what I think a lot of people are seeing now that the pandemic happened.
Okay. Clayton, how about you? What are you seeing when it calling upon God's name in every trouble, praying, praising, and giving thanks?
How I see that right now?
Yeah. Or I mean, how is we'll go with Christians. How's the Christian church in 2020 doing with those things?
I feel like it depends on what side you're seeing it from. If you're seeing it from like, we're sitting here right now. How's the worshiping? How's it been? Is it increased? Has like the involvement increased? I would say no. I don't think it's increased at all. I think if anything, it's gotten harder for people just because a lot of churches you can't go in and be actually in person there. Whereas, yes, it does test those who aren't going in. So they're making more of the effort to get that connection with the larger group and still like being with God. You know what I mean? The fellowship. But I mean, I just don't know what I would say about it, because the 2020 is it's a weird year right now.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, and so it's an interesting, and definitely in the next episode we'll get to pick that up with the third commandment and church and that community. But it is interesting because like it's funny because we're not coming into the building, but like at least according to statistics and things like that, more people are engaging with our worship services, at least here. So anecdotally, very anecdotally, more people are engaging with what we've been doing in worship now than they did before the pandemic. And that's not to say at all that we should never go back. And that is not it at all. But because I think at the same time, very anecdotally, we can see those who were coming are definitely missing and are not a part of that group that's doing a stronger reach. So, and I think it's just, and again, I think we'll get to dive into this a little bit. In the next episode, we'll get to talk with Arleah and Noah are coming for that one. And we'll get to talk about the mission and the outreach that the church still has. And I think that's what's become super apparent in 2020 was there's a whole lot more people that needed Jesus that we weren't seeing because we were so focused on the building and the four walls. And I think And I think kind of to speak to both of your points a little bit, as far as how we doing with calling upon every trouble, praying, praise, and give thanks, I think it's a mixed bag. I think it's a very mixed bag because I think Christians are facing trouble, are facing hardships, are facing conflict, are facing and are reacting in two different ways. There are those who are saying, I'm going to turn to the Word of God. And again, I think we'll get to pick this up in the next episode. Where I'm going to turn to the Word of God. I am going to call upon it because I'm in trouble, and I'm going to thank Him for what I do have because I'm seeing people lose things left and right. And then there's the other side that are saying, I'm panicking. I'm afraid of the world. I'm afraid of my neighbor. I'm afraid of everything. I'm afraid of the government. I'm afraid of whatever you want to do, and they're not turning to God in those situations. And I'm certainly not saying, we actually get to pick that up in the Fourth Commandment episode too. I'm not saying you should, there's a lot of people that are like, trust God, don't listen to anybody else. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about the Fourth Commandment. Like that'll become really applicable to listen to those in places of authority, and that's a calling for God too. But yeah, I think that's really the encouragement of this one is to allow your cuss words to be reminders to call upon God. Right to this reminder of those times when you do feel afraid, when you do feel these things, to expand your vocabulary one, but then to kind of move on. Okay, so we've been wrapping up in kind of a singular way so far, and that is we've had this conversation, right? And we've been able to play around with it, been able to have different things. But from this conversation, what are some conversations you're hoping other people are willing to have in their circles, or maybe what are some conversations you would like to have or you feel like you need to have in your own circles?
I think for me, just trying to focus on the positives of now and trying to, like we said, pray, praise, and give thanks to God because, at the end of the day, that's what we're here to do. But to just be thankful for what we have and to remind others that, we have all of what we have because of Him, kind of thing.
Definitely. How about you, Clayton?
Yeah, definitely just take a step back and just see what's actually happening. Like, where's our world coming to, and what are you doing to be a part of it? I definitely feel like the same thing with Aiden type deal. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's standing out to me, and I like, and this is where I'll kind of leave us. I remember my first year here. So conversations I hope that happen. This is where I'm going. I remember I was going away for some trip. Maybe it was the family trip I usually do. And we'd planned a movie night. And I was so excited, Captain America Civil War had recently come out. We were going to watch it. All right. So this is about, 4 years ago? And great Marvel movie, easily, right? And easily one of the top 5 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, easily. And so I was going away, but I was leaving it with a volunteer. It was going to be great. So I said, I probably need to watch it again and just see, because I was like, oh, let's enjoy it too. Well, I watched it, and my soul drained out of my body because I did not realize how many cuss words were in this movie. Oh my goodness. Actually, Marvel is, compared to DC particularly, awful at their use of cuss words. It became very apparent to me after this. Like Spider-Man Homecoming was a great example, constantly cussing. But in general, Thor Ragnarok, totally inappropriate in so many different places. And I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, don't get me wrong. But Civil War, so I realized this. And so before I went on my vacation, I had to send an email. Or I chose to. I didn't have to. I sent an email to the parents and said, look, I'm so sorry. I did not watch it before I chose the movie. But just so you know, there is a lot of cussing. And they're going to be watching it here in the student ministry building. So they're going to be watching it at church. And so what I said was, but here's the thing. If you choose not to send your kid, I totally understand. But if you do choose to choose your kid, there's a cool opportunity that you might have. Ask them if they noticed. Ask them if they noticed every time there was a cuss word or every time it said something. And on the ride home, just ask them, why do you think it hurt so much when you were there in the church, but we didn't notice it when we've seen this movie before, or something like that? And to ask it, because I think it is one of those, and to me, how do you think that conversation goes, right? Why did it bother him more here than it would when it first came out?
This is holy ground. So
Yeah, God's here.
Your shoes should be off right now.
Yeah, something like that. Well, like you get to now have that conversation of, well, son, well, daughter,
Son.
isn't God everywhere? Right. So it's like, shouldn't it bother us other places too? So it's interesting of that idea of taking God with you even beyond these walls. So I hope those conversations get to happen. People get to talk about the significance of cussing. Why does it bother you? And can you use better words? Can you communicate better about what you're doing? And really, can you use your words to encourage others rather than tear them down with stuff like that too? So guys, I hope that you have enjoyed this episode of the Second Commandment in 2020. We're going to continue next with the Third Commandment. Again, pretty excited about that one. Excited for our talk with Arlia and Noah there. If you have questions with any of these, be sure to send us those questions. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, or if you can find my email, go ahead and do that too. But guys, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Let's Talk About It. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to give us a follow. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform, the Trinity Klein app, or both Instagram and YouTube at TK Crew Students. Have a topic in mind you'd like us to use as a theme? Let us know. Let's talk about it. We'll see you next time.